we hand over to Lord Tony Berkeley for our High Speed 2 talk. This is available on live streaming, but that means that you can actually go to it tomorrow and listen to it again. Or if somebody missed it completely, because it's just going to sit there on YouTube, if somebody missed it completely, they can hear it for the first time tomorrow or next week. So thank you very, very much.
You want me to go now?
I want you to go now.
Okay, right.
You're already live streaming.
What? Well, I'll get up here, I think. Yeah, it needs to go up, doesn't it?
It needs to be in
Yeah.
the
Is that the right one now?
Yeah.
Right.
Good.
Right. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Tony Berkeley. I'm very honoured that Dorothy and the Civic Society have invited me to come and update you this evening about where HS2 has got. I suspect that most of you know rather more about the project than I do, but if you want to challenge me, go on, challenge me, because we'll have a good discussion. The reason I'm taking a lot of interest in HS2 is I'm a civil engineer, and I spent 15 years building the Channel Tunnel, so I sort of learnt the good and the bad bits about it. In particular, the programme and the budget. Surprisingly, the budget was not that much out, but it was a bit out. The civil engineering was on time. The fixed equipment was a bit late, and the IT in the trains was a year late. So we ended up by being a year late, and but you compare that with the time comparison of HS2 or HS1, it's, you know. So, turning to HS2, I think it suffers from too many people who think they're railway experts, and they love drawing lines on maps and expecting the trains to go faster and faster. If you choose the opportunity right to persuade politicians that it's a good thing to do, you can sometimes get it through. And this is really what they did at the last days of the Labour government of 2010, I think. They managed to persuade the then minister, who was Andrew Adonis, that the idea really would be a good idea to build a high-speed line north-south, or maybe two of them, and to go to Heathrow, because, again, there's this obsession with getting to Heathrow quickly. Many of us would prefer to get to a city centre more quickly or more conveniently. But anyway, ministers like flying, as you all know. And so they hired Professor McNaughton to design a route to deliver. And he came back and said, well, I can give you a route that's a project that would be the best in the world, the fastest, and it'll put the British railway industry into the leading position. Now, we all heard about it. You heard a lot about it here, because one of the things about a high-speed line is that it needs to go straight. Trains don't like going round corners. It's quite simple, but I'm afraid that's the way it is. And so when people suggested that you should follow the existing lines and put a couple more tracks on them or speed them up a bit, that didn't work for Professor McNaughton, and especially going through places like the Chilterns, where it's quite hilly. Why they went to Euston, I've been asking many people why come to Euston, because you want to get from Birmingham or Manchester or Leeds to London, hasn't got to be Euston. But the message I get is that, well, all trains from Birmingham and Manchester always go to Euston, to which my answer was, well, Eurostar changed its terminal from Waterloo to St Pancras 10 years ago now, and nobody seemed to complain about that. But anyway, the politicians got a grip on this, and there was then urgency to get something approved in Parliament before the general election, because there was a fear that the Tory party would probably try and cancel it. So they pushed through with that and came up with this extraordinary view that the Department of Transport should be the promoter, the sponsor, and in order to get as many things decided before Parliament changed as possible, they awarded construction contracts, of which you see one or two round here, and it goes all the way up as far as Birmingham, on a cost-plus basis. You all know what a cost-plus basis is. Apart from the fact that for the contractors it's a wonderful way of making money, it actually means that they don't have to think very hard about how much money they spend, because however much they spend, it'll get paid by the client. And I've got some friends who used to work in the industry. I think they've probably left it now. And so one day they had a delivery of 24 JCBs. You all know what a JCB is. And then they sat in the yard for 6 months, not being used. And cranes were the same. And it's still going on today. So it was a license to print money. And of course, the contractors were also designing it as well as building it. So they had all the information about how they could make it the best in the world, but at probably the most expensive. But the other interesting thing was that the ministers didn't really seem to take much notice of what was going on. It was going ahead. Politicians love, high speed, love railways, and it was grinding ahead. And I was trying to get some questions on costs, which I've been doing for years now. But there was a challenge towards the end of Boris Johnson's reign, shall we say. They appointed a man called Doug Oakervey to do a report on whether the project should go ahead. Was it still, sort of remotely viable, or was it a waste of time? And then they asked me to go on that committee, which I accepted. But the problem was that they wouldn't give us any information about costs. So how do you say whether it's good value for money or it's on time or anything if you don't have any information on costs? That's why I resigned from that committee towards the end. So of course it ground ahead, and Johnson eventually confirmed it, and work started and ground on until Rishi Sunak, the then Prime Minister, cancelled most of it on October 2023, which you'll all remember, and we all hoped that was going to be the end of it. But it sort of, it resurrected. I mean, Sunak was quite clear. He said the money should be saved and they put towards local road and rail connections, which many of us think was a good idea. But they got away with it because the civil servants who were in charge, they were protecting their own bottoms and they were protecting their ministers' bottoms. And there's one minister who actually gave evidence to some parliamentary committee, and she told a lie about the cost. it was quite clear because they'd had actually said what the cost was going to be, and she gave a different figure, which was much better for the for the project, but less good for the taxpayer. And I complained to the Cabinet Secretary that this minister had lied to Parliament, and that's the kind of thing that you end up being hung, drawn and quartered for in the old days. Anyway, it didn't materialise because Johnson wanted it to go ahead. And so now, you know, until 2024, well, it's not quite 2 years away, Mark Wilde was finally appointed to try and rescue what's been built, and what has been built, or is being built, is somewhere between Old Oak Common and outside Birmingham, and of course the Old Oak Common station itself, and now they've started building the tunnel towards Euston without any clear indication of where it's going to end up, which I find it quite extraordinary. Anyway, Parliament has done a pretty awful job in checking this, but I'd just like to quote a couple of comments from the Public Accounts Committee, who is supposed to be the committee which supervises and checks on whether the government is wasting money or not. And just a few words from the report. The report, and I quote, the report highlights that the Department of Transport and HS2 disagreed on the costs of Phase 1, between 45 and 54 billion, where HS2 thought it was 54 to 66. Well, that's quite a difference. I mean, that's, what, 10 billion or so? No, 20 billion. So they're pretty critical from a committee of members of Parliament. And now it's going ahead with this little tunnel extension towards Euston from Old Oak Common. The committee said, and I quote again, there is still no plan for work on the station, the existing Network Rail station, the underground station, or the commercial and housing developments nearby. Clarity is needed on the funding for the station, especially as the government said it's going to be privately financed, but nobody's come up with any privately financed ideas. Worse still, the committee says that the future governments need to learn experience of how this project is how not to run a major project. And the committee is sceptical of the government's ability to successfully deliver even a curtailed scheme, which is what we probably have now. And what possible benefit can the government now do to salvage, which we'll want to go on and talk about. And the committee then said the Department of Transport has failed to manage this enormous project and manage HS2 properly. That's a pretty condemning statement from a parliamentary committee. Why are they doing it? As the debates come back onto why they're doing it at all, part of it was to do with the capacity on the lines, existing lines, mainly the West Coast Main Line, and which is all right when it's better when it's got 4 tracks, but it's which it has in the southern end of it. But when you get beyond Crewe, it becomes 2 tracks, and it's interesting that they. I think what Peter Hendy, the minister, is trying to do is to make sure that even though Sunak cancelled much of it, because the bit from here, or Old Oak Common, to Birmingham and maybe a little bit further, is got to be finished, because you can't leave half-finished structures all the way across the countryside, probably. He wants them to look at extending the 4-track further towards Manchester, and not at the same high speed, but sort of have it come down the same route to Old Oak Common and then into Euston. And of course there's no budget for that, there's no plan for that, but they still think it's a good thing to do because all trains from Manchester must go to Euston, so they say. Old Oak Common is another, I think you all know where Old Oak Common is now. They're building 8 platforms on the Great Western now, 8, which is probably 4 more than they need, because that's a relic of, well, you might want to come down from Birmingham, get off there and get on the train to Heathrow. Well, you might. But do you need 8 platforms? Well, in case one of the tracks need repair, then you've got to have another platform somewhere else. But Hendy's gone further than this and said, well, if you want to travel from Bristol or Cardiff to Birmingham, you probably would want to go by Old Oak Common. Now, if you look at a map, that's the sort of the zigzag. I said, well, what's wrong with cross-country trains? He said, well, yeah, but you might want to go this way. I said, well, it'll take longer, and it'll probably be more expensive, and it seems a rather daft idea to build 4 extra platforms just for that. As I said, they've started tunnelling from Old Oak Common, but they don't have a budget, or they don't have a route, and you all know why that is. And then there's a question of, well, do we need Euston at all for HS2? And you've got to then join the debate about how many trains an hour are going to go up HS2. The maximum is probably 18. That's a really high number. More likely is nearer 10. If it's only 10, they can turn round happily at Old Oak Common and not go there at all. And if it's more than 10, then they probably need extra platforms, but they can then have the platforms at Euston if the train goes along there. One of the things that I think it was Jeff who did it. Where is Jeff? I can't see it. Anyway, we had a bit of a debate as to how long it would take. You can correct me, but it's how long it would take a passenger to get off an HS2 train at Old Oak Common to get to Tottenham Court Road, which is probably the centre of London, either by going to Euston and down the Northern Line, or changing to the Elizabeth Line and going straight in. Interestingly, the ministers couldn't give us an answer. They denied it all, and they said, well, you've got to go to Bond Street. Why? Well, we don't measure to Tottenham Court Road. And I mean, the whole thing is just so damn stupid. So it's still going to Euston at the moment, but there's then the question of if it gets to Euston sometime in somebody's lifetime, how many platforms should there be at Euston for HS2 trains? The minimum is probably 10. The maximum could be 18, but if you don't know where the trains are going to go up north, because they haven't decided what they're going to build up north, there's not a lot of point in doing it. And up north, they have slowly come round to the idea that a Manchester Leeds and extension improvement to the existing line, not a high-speed one, but a faster one, would probably be the first priority. And then the third priority would be to extend down to Crewe and Birmingham. When that's going to happen, we don't know. I saw a figure in one of Hero's papers suggesting a timing of something between 2040 and 2048. I might have got it wrong, But it was a long, long way ahead to link up with the alleged private sector station being built round the corner. If we think about that and the fact that we've been doing this for 15 years, you've been suffering for 15 years, and you've got another 20 years to go, if it happens, which is not a very attractive issue. I think the real problem for me is that they don't know where they want to run the trains, except they want all the options open, and they want to leave space in the new Euston building to take, well, however many trains they think there should be, but somewhere between 10 and I said 15, 16, 17, 18. I think they've forgotten that they, are they going to make money on this? Well, they've got to find a developer to start with, and a developer will give them a deal. But there's also, we mustn't forget that the sight line between Hampstead Heath and Trafalgar Square, is it? I can't remember. You can't build big towers in the middle of Euston without you getting the king or the queen to say something. But it is a challenge. But my big worry is that we don't have any information about the project at the moment. I mean, I think Mark Keir's doing his best, but there is no real vision of what the government thinks should be built between where and where, and it's just, well, let's get the middle bit built and then worry about the rest of it later. Now, Birmingham to London is a good idea, maybe, for some people. There's already 3 different services from Birmingham to London, but if ministers want to have a 4th one. But you've got to do something with the existing line from Old Oak Common up towards Birmingham. So leaving it as a half-finished piece of concrete is really not very sensible. So probably that, but then they've got to connect it to the West Coast Main Line. And they don't have a really project for that yet, which works. So I think my message to all of you and to me and my colleagues is to keep on asking questions and challenging them, because I don't think they've got a business case. I can see why they want to finish the bit from Old Oak Common to Birmingham. The justification for going to Euston, I can see it's going to grind on, and eventually they'll say, well, we can't find a developer, so we'll pay for it ourselves, and put all this extra money that's needed for Euston, you know, down to building the station. And having built the station, the platforms and the sort of decks and everything, I expect that they'll be able to find a developer who'll just put some columns on the top and, you know, turn it into a nice office building. Or affordable housing they won't do because it makes less money. So it's a rather depressing story at this stage. We have very little information. We have, but they've been at it for 25 or so years, sorry, 15 or so years, haven't got very far, and don't seem to have a clue where they want to go. And I think that's a big problem. But I think I'm going to stop there. I think I don't have nothing else to say about it, really. Happy to answer questions, of course.
Can I ask if there are... Dorothy, would you do the... and I'll do the other ones.
Jeff's got his hand up.
Yeah, he would. Let's get... we'll put Jeff on the chair Jeff, keep it short.
Can you hear me? Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Yay.
Jeff, keep it short.
It's short, yes. Firstly, a quick one for Tony. He mentioned the cost-plus contract. I thought the engineering works were design and build contracts. I've heard everybody saying they're cost-plus. Cost-plus means that the government keeps buying tractors for the contractor.
I can't really hear what he's saying.
No, Jeff, we can't really make head or tail.
Keep it a bit further from your mouth. It'll come up here.
There, okay. So everybody keeps saying the contracts, the engineering contracts, are cost-plus.
Yeah,
But I heard right from the beginning that they were design and build. Cost-plus is where the government keeps buying JCBs for the contractor, as you said. But design and build is where the government or HS2 can't stop the contractor unless the contractor fails to comply with what's called the employer's requirements, which are very, very loose, or pays the contractor a large penalty. So I think it's possibly a design and build cost-plus contract. I mean, I can't think what else it could be, but I really, if Tony has got some knowledge on that, I'd be grateful.
Okay. Shall we take a few more?
Oh. Yep.
Right up. Thank you. Yes, cost plus. I had a question. I think Jeff has constrained my ability to ask the question because he's probably given it a little bit more sensible.
Tony?
But if it is cost plus, and you think that the London to Birmingham ought to be completed, isn't that an open-ended project? It may never be completed based on past performance. And isn't there a way, do you think there's a way of getting a grip on this cost-plus contract in order to constrain it and to manage it much better? Is there a way that you can do that, or are we just left to whatever they decide?
I mean, I was using shorthand. Is this on? Yeah. I was using shorthand for cost plus. I mean, it included design and then procure and then build, all on cost plus. And of course, that includes all the environmental studies that they did or didn't do. Everything was on cost plus. And you've only got to look at the quality of the oilskins that the workers wear. I mean, most of us, if we're going on a site or something like that, you use something old, it'll be all right. But no, they've got the best. And so the real problem is that there is nobody in the government who is capable and has the authority to challenge these things. That's the problem. I mean, the government can do what it likes, as we all know. And they can do design, cost plus. They can say, well, let's design it for 50 miles an hour faster. How much extra will that cost, and the track costs and the bends and everything? And the contractors will say, yeah, that's lovely, you know. But there's nobody going to say, well, do you need it? Do you need to go that fast? Do you need to, go straight as opposed to put in a few curves? And this is the challenge that people should be doing, and they're not doing, and they never have done. Well,
they're not doing it because the speeds are set in the employer's requirement, and to change that would induce an enormous penalty, and that's the problem we've got between Old Oak Common and Euston Station, because the station contract is entirely different. As the the HS2, or now the DFT, can change the station. They can't change anything to do with the track without enormous cost penalty. So effectively, it's called a sunk cost, I think. So that's why we're stuck with a Euston station, because there's going to be a track, there's going to be a tunnel, because they can't stop it, as far as I'm aware. Unless you can, maybe that's the opportunity for a House of Lords question to clarify.
I think you're right, they probably can't stop it. Well, sorry, they could stop it, but the legal costs of the contractors suing the government for billions and billions, it just wouldn't work. No. You know.
Look, I'd just like to add, I think you're right that there's no oversight or there's no expertise from the government. You'll find, I mean, I find that in local authorities, in a lot of things where the contractors pretty much run what they think is needed, and the people who purchase the product from the contractors aren't really up to speed on what it is they're buying. And I think you've just said that, and that is a horrendous position for this country to be in.
This isn't really a question. I suppose you could frame it as a question, but it just struck me listening to you. A lot has changed since 2010. The birth rate has fallen a lot. Net migration is falling a lot. AI is coming along at a rate of knots. So presumably the trend must be towards, if anything, a declining population, not a rising population. And I don't know what ideas they had in 2010. They were probably forecasting, you know, endless rise in our population to be carried on these trains. But unfortunately for these sorts of projects that go on for so long, the circumstances in which you're doing them change. And whatever the legal arrangements are, at some point someone has to turn around and say, this is ridiculous. But
Yes, indeed. But I mean, they looked at the high-speed lines in Italy and France and thought, well, we want to do one better than them. But I mean, to be fair, Germany has had its problems of building big projects. I mean, Stuttgart Station is being built as a through station, as Andy Burnham wants in Manchester, quite rightly. And they've been doing it for 15 years or something. And Berlin, the new Berlin airport is, you know, it's one of these ones that are going to go on for 20, 30 years, I think. It's just that you've got to have a different mentality. You've got to start off with a specification of what you want to build and why, answering all the questions that you've just put. And you've got to make then sure that you don't change the spec because circumstances have changed. I mean, COVID didn't help. It didn't actually make that much difference. And, but it has meant that fewer people are commuting because they're using their Wi-Fis and everything. But it's interesting that I'm told the passenger numbers off-peak at weekends are higher, but in the rush hour they're lower. So yes, it does change, but at the end of the day, you still need to know how many passengers you think will use it, and keep checking that you've got the figure up to date. And some of the smaller branch lines or diversions that have been built in the last 20 years, they've all come up with forecasts, because you can't get permission to build it unless you've got a proper revenue and traffic forecast. Quite often, the number of passengers is well in excess of what's been forecast. But then this one here, we could never understand how you're going to send everybody first class at very high speed, and give them a slap-up meal, and charge them 500 quid single. I mean, we could never work out how much the fares would be, and would they compete with the West Coast Main Line? And of course, nobody will answer that question because the government says, well, we've decided. It's very sad, you're quite right.
Okay, Tony, we must thank you very much. We've kept you talking now for a very long time, which doesn't mean that we can't continue talking, but let's do it over refreshments. Thank you very, very
Thank
much.
you.